as well. So I am inspired right now by these themes of gratitude, of generosity, of reciprocity, which I actually consider as, in some ways, reciprocity and belonging feel like they necessitate one another. So those are sort of the themes of what I'd like to share, and you could also maybe consider it sort of thematic to the season of holidays. But as I was sitting with it, I was also thinking about one of the core Buddhist teachings, and I have never heard a talk that brings together the theme or concept of reciprocity with this particular teaching. So that's going to be the exploration for us this morning. But I thought I would start with one of my favorite quotations from Dogen, who was the founder of the Soto school of Zen and Japanese Buddhist priest. And these words are attributed to him. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. So to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. And I bring those words into the beginning of this talk because what I'm really doing is talking about relationship here with all of those themes of reciprocity, of gratitude, of generosity, of belonging. And Dan also outed my kind of ecological orientation. And so I thought we would all kind of start with a tree. We live in Portland. Most of you, I think, live in Portland. Close by, there's lots of trees. There might be a tree that you feel particularly close to. So I invite you to consider that tree and kind of the astonishing conditions required for a tree to come into being. One of my favorite trees, and I've lived with them quite a bit, are ponderosas in various mountainous areas that I've resided. And ponderosa trees, they grow from a seed that lives inside a female cone that is fertilized by a male pollen from a male cone. Takes 2 years after that female cone is fertilized for a seed to develop, and then that seed has to fall from the cone and get just the right conditions, you know. And this is all trees have their own different, kind of origins and biology, but so you might consider your own tree, and is it from an acorn? Is it from a seed? Is it from a rhizomatic root system? But nevertheless, it requires particular conditions. It requires a certain amount of safety from predation. It requires a certain amount of moisture, not too much, not too little. Requires soil, it requires sunlight. And there's a lot that goes into a tree developing, and then the tree actually becoming an adult, whatever that would, however many years it takes for a tree to become an adult. But I mean, even out here, like, wow, these trees out here, they are probably, those couple of pines are at least twice as old as me. So really, how extraordinary that these beings have come into an ecology that supports them. And I was considering the tree also with respect to a story that's been told about, it was a kind of contemporary story. One of the monks was Chogyam Trokpa. Wait, I'm not saying that right. Chogyam Trungpa. And then another, a Tibetan monk, and then another monk from a different tradition who's, I don't remember who that was, but there's a story of them sitting underneath a tree and meditating for a number of hours. And at one point, one of them opens his mouth and says, "They call this a tree." And then the two of them just break out in peals of laughter. And I love that story because, who knows exactly what is going on inside their minds, but the way that I interpret it and the way that I think most people do is that there's this almost absurdity in the way in which we isolate something and call it a thing when it is so much the result of myriad conditions. This tree being not just an isolated tree, but it's the sunlight, it's the rain, it's the soil, it's the ways in which it's been nurtured into being. It's contingent upon all of those things. And Thich Nhat Hanh would use the term interbeing to describe that kind of sense of conditionality. And he had a teaching where he would point to a piece of paper and say, in this piece of paper, there's clouds, clouds that created rain for the trees. There's a logger and the logger's ancestors. There's, all of these things in a piece of paper. So the Buddhist principle that I think beautifully encapsulates this kind of teaching of conditionality, of embeddedness, of interbeing is in the Pali called paticca samuppada. It's often translated into dependent co-arising, paticca samuppada. And paticca is the means kind of, or can be translated as because of or dependent upon, and then samuppada is originating or coming into being. So dependent co-arising, and this idea that everything is contingent upon everything else. I've heard some Tibetan teachers describe it as like leaning, like everything leans on everything else. And the beauty of it is that it's a teaching, we can kind of make sense of it, wrap our heads around the truth of it. And as we practice, this simplicity of attending to our experience that we do together, that we did together earlier, that this mindfulness practice, it's like we start to experience or see it more intimately. In very simple ways, like the way that it was a blue sky this morning. I don't know, maybe Portland's been different, but White Salmon, we are living in a cloud. I haven't seen the sun for a long time. And so I woke up and it's this like glorious blue day, and that did something in my heart. It was very like uplifting, that's conditionality. Like seeing the blue sky and having the heart uplifted, or last night having this, oh no, what if I don't sleep tonight? It's a long day, right? That's a thought that brought a little bit of contraction into my body. That's conditionality. But when we slow down through the practice of mindfulness, we really start to get so intimate, so attuned to how conditioned we are, to how this is not an isolated system working on its own here. It is so much part of all of these conditions, some of which we understand and see, and most of which we don't. And ecologically, I just find this so powerful. Some of you know I really like to lead retreats and practice in nature. And one thing that I just find so beautiful is the way in which we can kind of really start to embody or sense those teachings of, there we are, like sitting under trees, and, this carbon dioxide is like, I'm in exchange here when I'm breathing, with all of these photosynthesizing plants. And we are here in this room too. But there's something for me about being on the land and outside where I really, wow, that this breath is not my breath. This is photosynthesis, this is life breath. And similarly, our body's 99 point whatever percent water, mostly water. We're like the watershed. We're just that we live upon. So we're embedded in all of these ways that are very material and also very immaterial. There's a quotation maybe some of you know from Carl Sagan. He wrote, "If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you first need to invent the universe." Right? Like, we need it all, not just an apple. So there's this way in which, we're leaning upon each other. There's this conditionality that we don't exist in an isolated way, and yet then there's this reality or this misunderstanding of being alone, and the really heartbreaking irony of our particular times where there's such an epidemic of loneliness and sense of isolation at times also when we're more technologically connected than we've ever been before, and I don't think that's a coincidence. But one of the beautiful things about this practice is that it reminds us of our belonging. And I don't know if these words make sense. Try them on, see if they make sense for you. But to really understand, like, there is no here, like this moment, this is not as it is without you in it. Like, there is not this moment without you in it. It can't be. We are each creating this moment together. And it's quite striking if that really penetrates. There's like, we are not, each one of us, we are not, what's the word? Arbitrary, And what's beautiful too is that it actually implicates us in a participation in life. That we're not spectators to life. We're actually full participants in life. We have to be, because we're co-creating this moment, whether we understand that we're doing that or not. And there's something I find quite inspiring about that. Like, how is it that this shared life is moving through me? Because we also are these individual expressions of life. And there's this quotation from Martha Graham, who maybe some of you are familiar with, a movement teacher. I don't even know how else to describe her, but very much spiritual, divine, mindfulness, movement, somatics. But she wrote, "There is a vitality," she says this so much better than I think I could. "There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. You do not even have to believe in yourself or your work. You have to keep yourself open. And again, I think of this as the practice we do of being available. Like that's what we practice, is we're not practicing the doing, how I'm going to accomplish or fabricate the next thing or get really wound up in the kind of perseverations of the mind. We're actually practicing like, oh, what is it to be alive when all of that's put aside for a while? What is it? What is the way that this life moves through me? So there's something very personal about it, like, oh, this unique expression of life, but there's also something very impersonal. You know, like, this is not about me. And that's how I often feel when I'm on the teacher seat, is like, all right, here we go. Like this isn't about me here. What's gonna emerge? How do I keep myself open? How do I keep myself an open channel, especially with, there's something like so sacred about being in this seat. Like, wow, what an honor, to speak to the Dharma. Like, so not about Kirsten here, as best I'm able. Yeah. There's so this impersonal and this personal nature. There's a story of John Seed, who was seen as the founder of deep ecology, and he was a longtime Buddhist practitioner, and he was brought to, he's Australian, and he was brought to this kind of direct action, old growth forest defense. And when he was there, he had a big insight. He saw himself or realized himself not as John Seed, but as a manifestation of the rainforest protecting itself. And it was a huge transformation for him. And, he became a real embodiment of earth defense. But not because John Seed was doing it. It was because he really felt like, oh, I'm the earth defending itself here. So this getting out of our own rumination, how I should be, how I think I should be compared to other people, or compared to how I wanted to be, all of this, it's such so common. But then we get to start to see and feel how we're embedded and how we belong and how we matter, and then what it is to be in a sense of reciprocity with the world. Where we're participants, we're breathing, we're taking in, and we're breathing out. We're very much part of that kind of giving and receiving. And I like to think of giving and receiving as generosity and gratitude, and how it requires that openness of the heart. There's a story that I've been wanting to share that happened fairly recently for me. And so I had this, there's like many stories in this story, but my sister and I kind of inherited this very small abandoned cabin recently, and it happens to be on this walking path that when I live in a yurt, and I often walk to my sister's house. She lives across the White Salmon River, and to get to her house, I go through this little cabin's trail. It doesn't have a driveway, and it doesn't have a septic system, and it's kind of down a hill. Anyway, but it's been abandoned, so I've been going through as a path. And then we sort of inherited it, and it's its own story. but it was a bit overwhelming, and I was gone on retreat for a few weeks over the summer, and I have a dear friend, a dear neighbor friend. She's 80, and she just lost her dear partner of 50 years, Lindy, in February. And so since then, I've been going over and sharing food and checking in on her. And she was for a little while there. I mean, she was really, really depressed, and she was. Every time I check in on her, she'd say things like, "Oh, I don't know, it's just this is the end. I can feel it coming. I'm ready to go." So anyway, I left for retreat. I came back. I walked the path through this little kind of abandoned cabin, and this is a day after I get back, and the roof, which had leaves on it, like half a foot of leaves, and then just surrounded in brambles and stuff. So the roof has been cleaned off, and it's all been like weed whacked around this cabin. And was totally perplexed. I called my sister. She didn't know. So the next person I call, because just to call, is Oma, my friend Oma, my neighbor. And I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "Girl, I have never been better. Have you seen your cabin?" And I said, "Yeah, did you do that?" She goes, "Well, you've been so loving, so kind. I wanted to do something for you. And so I hired the neighborhood to blow the leaves off that roof. And then, that I was out there supervising him. And she's been a homesteader all her life. Like, she is hardy. Her whole I'm going to die soon stuff was her. Those were ideas. But I mean, we never know. But anyway, she goes, "Yeah, so he was out there on the roof, but then I started to feel really energized, so I got the weed whacker out, and I just started, cutting things down, and the more that I started to work, like, the better I felt." And she said, "It feels so good to do something for someone I love." She said, "It was like I got my life back." I mean, it was so amazing. I mean, I was just on the phone. I remember exactly where I was. I was just crying because, she was basically giving this like beautiful Dharma talk. She's like, "Just feels so good to give to someone I love. Like, it gave me my life back." And that is, to me, it's just that story just embodies what it is to be in that open swinging door of the heart, the generosity and the gratitude, that there was a gratitude from her of what it was to, receive from me. And then it opened up into this generous act. And then it was just part of being alive, like, to be in that ebb and flow, in that reciprocity of being alive, that it, there was a bringing of her vitality back. And it's really shifted her. I could share more. This whole talk could be about her, but I'll move on. There's another story that I think really sort of represents that same theme, and it's from Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which some of you have read. And she's teaching her biology class of students. And she asks them if they love nature, and they all raise their hand. And she says, "Well, does nature love you?" And one person maybe raises their hand. And she speaks to that like incongruity as a sign that we have grown up lacking a sense of reciprocity in the world. What it is to love and be loved. Like, it really requires both to keep that heart open. And she writes, when you know that you Knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond. One-way street into a sacred bond. So what it is to remember, bring ourselves back together, our, the relationships that we have with each other, with the world, with the earth. I teach an eco-chaplaincy training program with Gil Ronsdell, who Dan mentioned. And one of the foundational practices that we practice is listening. Sometimes I think of meditation as we're just listening. Mother Teresa, you heard that from, being interviewed by Dan Rather, is asked how, what she does when she prays, and she says, well, I'm just listening. He says, well, what is God saying? Well, he's just listening too. And if you don't understand that, I have nothing more for you, or something like that. Yeah. But it's that being receptive, and there's both the giving and receiving there. There's listening as this act of receiving, deeply receiving, and also, have you been listened to well? Like, what a gift it is to have that level of attention. And that is one thing that I think we forget, especially in these times that we're kind of black market, isn't that what it's called? Weekend? Black Friday? Right. I think there's something to black market too, but Black Friday, yeah. We're told to, now is the time. We're supposed to get all the holiday gifts, listening, I think, is more precious than anything. Listening and being listened to. Yeah, I think we forget that. And that's not just, I like to think of it not just our human colleagues, but our other than human kin. I think of it as kind of impoverished that we grow up oftentimes believing we can only communicate with other humans. We have a whole world of life out here. Apparently there's a word in Potawatomi, which is Robin Wall Kimmerer's native language, not her first language, but her indigenous language, that is the sound of, I wouldn't be able to say the word, but it means the sound of a mushroom popping up through the earth. Wow. To get that quiet, where you can hear the sound of a mushroom popping up through the earth, and then you develop a word for it. It's special. There's a book I grew up with it's a children's book by Bird Baylor called The Other Way to Listen. Does anyone know that book? Yeah, a couple. Yeah, it's like an elder speaking to their child. Outside. They're teaching their grandchild. I think they write, or the book writes, but the grandparent is saying to the grandchild, when you know the other way to listen, you can hear the wildflower seed bursting open. You hear rocks murmuring and hills singing, and it seems like the most natural thing in the world. Of course, it takes a lot of practice, and you can't be in a hurry. Most people never hear these things at all. So this listening as a way in which we start to recognize, remember the sort of innate folding door of the heart, of giving and receiving, or generosity and gratitude. And there's something I think that I want to name about doors of the heart. Like, to me, those feel so much like when the heart really gets softened, when the heart gets tenderized, like we're so much more available to those moments of giving, those moments of being grateful, of receiving. And I was thinking about this last night, because I actually didn't sleep last night, for the record. That's all right, I can sleep on the airplane, hopefully. Yeah, so I was thinking about this talk a little bit, and I was remembering Joanna Macy was a dear mentor of mine, and for those of you who don't know her work, she was a Buddhist ecofeminist scholar, activist, elder who founded a collection of practices called The Work That Reconnects, that are aimed to really encourage us to navigate the kind of complexity and challenges of these times and respond wisely with wisdom and compassion. And she has this spiral that begins with gratitude. That's where it begins. And so I was contemplating that, because the idea is, again, it's like we're faced with, ecological collapse and social injustice and, the rise of predatory capitalism and discrimination and all of these things. And where we start, actually, is with gratitude. And I was thinking last night, oh, that's brilliant. I mean, I've thought it's brilliant before in many ways, but I was thinking about it through the lens of these sort of swinging doors of the heart and reciprocity and interbeing and conditionality. And, we start with gratitude, and it immediately opens up the heart, and it brings us into relationship. Like, if we're grateful for something, we are immediately in relationship. And then from being open, from being in relationship, then there's a responsivity of the heart. Like, so, okay, so here are these challenges. How is life moving through me to respond to these challenges, not from a place of, I should do that, or other people are doing this, or I've been told that this is the way to navigate that, but, oh, here's the tenderized heart that's already softened, making myself available. And then what arises? Oh, wow, that's really beautiful. So I think it would, I can't not name that the Buddhist teachings are really situated within this sense of giving, of receiving, of reciprocity. I mean, what you all have co-created here is its foundation is through generosity, it's through giving, and the Buddha's teachings, for hundreds of years now, in many communities being offered freely. And yet, these are monastics who are offering these teachings freely in exchange for being supported by the lay community. There's right there, and there's something very intentional about that. That what the Buddha really put into place was a system where here are lay people who are given an opportunity to be generous, to be grateful, to open their hearts, to be in relationship. If they were just given the teachings, that would not be the same thing as being implicated in a relationship of giving and receiving, of reciprocity. And likewise, the monks, they're reliant upon these gifts. There's something, I think, again, so beautiful, so wise about those practices reminding us and each other of our belonging, of our intrinsic belonging. So I mentioned listening as one way that we practice that we remember our belonging, that we're in relationship. And I mentioned more like listening to non-humans too. And I think I've shared this, I know I've shared this story before, but maybe not here. But there's a colleague of my father's, actually, 4 Arrows, who was a college professor, and on the first day of every class, he would have his students go out, and he'd say, I want you to go out and hug a tree. And, these are college students, and they'd be kind of like, well, okay, but I'll go do it. And then they'd come back, and he'd say, okay, now I want you to go back out, but I want you to ask permission first. And so they would go do it, again, and come back. And he said, despite their sort of cynicism or, whatever it was, there was something that would palpably shift. Just being given the suggestion that perhaps you can be in conversation with a non-human other. And I brought this into one of my retreats last spring. And I didn't encourage people to do it, but I always kind of encourage people to do it. But I didn't say it out loud. And someone came back. I was in a practice discussion with them, and they said, I tried it out, and I went to this tree, and I asked if I could sit by the tree, and I didn't hear anything. And in consent culture, like, silence is not a yes. And so I didn't, and I was feeling really silly. But then I looked up, and the tree was like this. So she was like, I took that as a yes. So, there's all sorts of ways to be in conversation if we suspend our disbelief. And it opens us up, right? Just considering that we can ask for permission, that we can be in relationship in that way, opens us up. And it is one reason I'm, so devoted to nature-based practice, is because it calls us into relationship constantly, into connection. And I think we need that in our world more than ever. I think our survival depends on it, recognizing that we're embedded here. Yeah. And this practice so much a doorway into that remembering. Okay. So I began with those words of Dogen, and I'm not quite ending, I'm almost ending though, wrapping up. But I'll repeat them. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. And this actualization of myriad things, this is the Buddhist path. We speak so much about freedom. And that's really, we're being liberated from this small sense, this very constrained sense of an isolated individual self. And this narrow sense of self, it's so limiting. And the liberation here is this recognition of being open, being in connection, of being embedded, of belonging, to the like mystery of life, like this miracle of life that we're part of. And these practices, these doorways of the heart, of being generous, of being grateful, of recognizing that we're participants here, how important. What beautiful gateways into that recognition. Yeah, it's really a gift to be on this path, isn't it? So I'm going to end with one of my favorite poems. It's by Joy Harjo, Eagle poem. To pray, you open your whole self, to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know, except in moments steadily growing and in languages that aren't always sound but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky, in wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion. Like eagle, rounding out the morning inside us, we pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. Let's just sit together for a moment and let the words settle.